New questions emerge over the San Diego City Council's land giveaway that nets developer Sunroad Enterprises more than $100,000 annually. And Republican leaders push for Kevin Faulconer to be the party's lone candidate for mayor in a closed-door meeting led by the business establishment. Plus, not everyone's enthusiastic about plans for a runway extension at North County's McClellan Palomar Airport. I'm Mark Sauer, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome. It's Friday, September 27th. I'm Mark Sauer. Joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are reporter Dorian Hargrove of the San Diego Reader, Tony Perry, San Diego Bureau Chief for the Los Angeles Times, and Allison St. John, North County Bureau Chief for KPBS News. Former Mayor Bob Filner took the heat when developer Sunroad Enterprises paid $100,000 in exchange for expansion of its Kearny Mesa project onto public land. Avoiding scrutiny in that deal, however, was the City Council, who okayed the giveaway with few questions asked. Now, details of the deal are emerging that show Filner may have done the right things, though perhaps in a ham-handed way, while Sunroad benefited greatly from the Council's action. Dorian Hargrove, start quickly. Give us an overview. What is this project? Give us a sense of its scope.
So it's a large mixed-use commercial residential project in Kearny Mesa. I think by the time all phases are done, I think it'll be 570 units.
Mm-hmm. And big project.
Big project, yeah. And in it is a 2-acre park. This was dwindled down after a while, the size of the park. Mm-hmm. But now it's a 2-acre park. And basically Sunroad, wanted to get more bang for their buck and took some more easements, some more land than they were, initially entitled to.
Right. So they set up the deal. It's going to be on a certain footprint, and the park is going to be a certain dimension for the public, obviously, a public park. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, in this phase 3, they say, no, we need how much on each end? It doesn't sound like a lot, but...
Well, they designed it. Mm-hmm. So they designed it with taking 2 9-foot strips of land basically on 2 different sides, so 18 feet total. 18
feet total. Now your story talked about this week, and it asked the question that we've been reporting this, and we'll get into a lot of this as we go, but we've been reporting that that Mayor Filner was kind of the culprit here, and he kind of shook him down for $100,000, and we'll get into the detail of that in a second. But the question I liked in your story was you asked, what does this mean to the developer? How much money? And you came up with a figure.
Yeah, so there were 3 options they had when they initially found out about this easement problem. One option was that they could redesign the whole thing and take, give that 9 feet back, mm-hmm. or 2 9-foot strips of land back.
18 feet,
and,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in rentable space, it was calculated that they would be paying $8,600 a month, or about $100,000 per year they were losing in rentable revenue.
So that was what it was worth to the developer. The question nobody really was asking. Yeah.
That wasn't a good option. So the second
And we're
option,
looking over many years. So we're really talking millions of dollars over many years of the life of this project.
Yeah, I don't think that option really hung around for a while.
No.
But the second one was to pay approximately $200,000 to do glazing on the windows, on the 2 facades there.
It was a fire issue.
Yeah, and because it is an access for fire. And that would have been $200,000. Mm-hmm. So, that was always on the table. And then the last one was to try to get the council to waive the policy, to give the land for free.
The thing is that this is not the first time we've seen Sunroad pushing the envelope to try and get just a little bit more than really is, legal, should we say, at this point, because we had the thing where they actually had to remove the top story of a building.
They built a building there. The FAA didn't like it because it was near Montgomery Field, and the state didn't like it, and they had to whack off the top of that building.
So, it makes you wonder why the City Council wouldn't sort of pay attention when you have the same company coming back again, trying to push into, in this case, public land.
They don't pay attention is we are in the depths of a terrible economic climate, and these folks come along with money and say, hey, we'll build you some housing and some commercial, and let's get some sales tax going. Be partners with us. Be nice to us. And the council rolls over, and in comes Bob Filner and says, well, no, land has responsibilities as well as privileges. Mm-hmm. How about something coming back this way? So it's the classic poker play between the 2 sides, bluffing. Right. If you make it too expensive, we'll take our ball and move to Temecula or whatever. Or
which they couldn't do in this case because 2 phases were already built. They were stuck here.
But this is the classic back and forth between the city and anybody willing to spend money in the city of San Diego.
Right. Well, you would have thought, and that's a good point. You would have thought that would have happened though before they were right there ready to start building phase 3. So let's let's get to that point Tony raises. Why did Faulconer, he vetoed this, and the council had passed it unanimously, so it looked like they had the votes to override his veto. Then what happened?
Yeah, so Faulconer steps in, and then I guess 2 weeks after the fact, 2 weeks after the veto, there was a check or two checks that came through, and it was $100,000, one to a Veterans Park in Ocean Beach, and the other one to a bicycling advocacy
Yeah,
group.
so the former mayor didn't put this money in his pocket. It went to public programs, good causes that one way or another weren't getting
Which
funded.
is significant legally. It went into the city account. If it had gone into his private account, I think the United States attorney would be today blazing away with a possible indictment.
Right.
But it went into a public account, and then they belched it right back out when there was controversy.
They returned it,
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to your kind of ham-handed way of
Yeah.
describing what he did. I mean, it was the right, this is public land and could be looked at as a public gift.
Well, let me jump ahead a little bit here, because the city, and we talked about this yesterday, the city does have a provision. The two city attorneys have noted you can't just give away public land like this. Explain that.
Yeah, so I mean, and this actually goes back quite a bit in history, where city attorneys have objected to any kind of donation or anything that could be looked as a gift, unless it serves a public purpose. And as recently as the World Trade Center building in downtown to be used as a homeless shelter, city attorney's office came and made sure that the council, gave a statement saying, hey, this is going to benefit the greater good or the public. And for this project in Sunroad, I don't know how they can claim such a thing. I don't know where the city attorney was.
And for those of us with long memories, we remember the city dealing with private companies to get them to move in or expand on Torrey Pines Mesa, and they got all sorts of deals. And they moved in, and a lot of them didn't fulfill what they said in terms of how many jobs, or I think one of them either skedaddled out of town after starting. So yeah, there's a history of companies promising to do this or that in exchange for a sweet deal from City Hall. Sometimes they follow through, sometimes they do not.
Now that we have a lawsuit involved here, we have a bite here from attorney Corey Briggs that we want to play, kind of outlining what he sees as the council's role in this.
You have to remember that 8 council members unanimously voted for that giveaway, despite some of them being up on the dais and being critical of the mayor over the $100,000. Yet they still voted to give away public park property. That's unconscionable, and unfortunately it's symptomatic of what goes on at City Hall far too often.
All right, so that talks about...
Well, I feel like that really raises this question that, I mean, Tony, you're making the point. It's sort of behind the scenes. If there's a benefit to the public, what is it? I think the public would like to know, what are we getting for this 7 feet of parkland? Because maybe there was some kind of a benefit the city council felt that they were gaining, but it's all so part of the bigger deal that it's impossible to tell.
If that was the case, it was never mentioned in any emails between the Sunroad's Vice President Tom Story and anyone else in the city. I mean, I went back quite a ways, and there was no, hey, well, you will get this benefit if you allow us this space or anything else. It was strictly, hey, this is going to make us, be more profitable, and this is the project we want.
And the feds are not investigating city council.
You push this along, and at the end of the game is eminent domain, where government steps in, buys people's property. Maybe they don't want to sell, but they force them to sell, and then they sell it to somebody else because they think it's in the public's interest. Always controversial. And of course, there have been all sorts of efforts to rein in eminent domain, but this is kind of minor league eminent domain. This is, hey, you want it, you pay for it.
But this park was part of, they had to give this green space as part of the development. That was a mitigating thing, and it looks like they were always planning to take some of that land back. Quickly, in a few seconds we have left on this segment, what's the next step? We've got the lawsuit. There's a hearing in Superior Court, right?
Yeah, there's actually 2 lawsuits.
Okay.
Both attorney Corey Briggs is representing, and both are actually going to be heard on November 15th. So we'll see what their arguments are going to be.
All right, we'll wrap it there on the Sunrose story. Next here, San Diego Republicans were miffed at relinquishing the mayor's office to liberal Democrat Bob Faulconer last fall. But Faulconer's self-inflicted demise gave GOP leaders a rare shot at taking back that key post. The immediate questions for GOP leaders: which candidate had the best chance of winning, and how can we limit the field? Tony Perry, your story this week talked about how they came together, the back long-term councilman Kevin Faulconer, and it was kind of an old, I don't know if cigars and smoke were involved, but it was kind of a backroom deal, was it not?
It was a throwback to the days when half a dozen guys could meet at the Cuyamaca Club or maybe at the Grant Grill, where women were not allowed in those days, and cut a deal. Now, more people, about 30 plus, and they were out at Tom Sudbury's very nice home in La Jolla, but they went out there to say, okay, who's our man? Is it Kevin Faulconer or is it Carl DeMaio? And Carl will be making, his second run, but Carl's a bit scratchy.
Who, of course, lost to Filner last fall.
Lost to Filner and...
Or Ron Roberts.
Or Ron Roberts, although I think Ron was in there sort of as a courtesy at 71, and he's doing very well over at the board. I don't know, and he's run before. And I think it was Carl or Kevin. And most of the folks apparently wanted Kevin. But there were folks that wanted Carl, and among those was Papa Doug Manchester, and he was very vocal about it. And apparently at some point, rather blustery in his tone, said, we haven't had anything good happen in this city in 15 years.
Yeah, and it was a little more bluster. We can't really go into that on a family program. But
And the former mayor, Jerry Sanders, who was mayor from, 06 to 2012, was there and did not take this kindly. And Jerry, we all know, for that low-key, courteous, community college sociology professor, he's not, but that's what he was, did not take this well, and to be candid, used some four-letter language that he remembers from his 25 years being a cop. And it went on, and it was not nice language, not the kind of stuff you should say around your mother or your priest, rabbi, imam, whatever, or not when there's a video camera around that could go to YouTube.
Right.
But in certain gatherings, it can have a chastening, bracing effect, and apparently it did.
Yeah.
And
he was clearly angry. I mean, he stepped right up. Hey, wait a minute.
We all remember 2008 during his reelection when his opponent was saying some pretty tough stuff about him and went up there and said, how are you, Jerry? And he responded, bleep you.
Yeah.
I mean, he is capable of this language. Not very often, but he does it. Right. And apparently it had a bracing, chastening effect. Yeah. Papa Doug backed down, apologized, and from that meeting came a feeling that it's Kevin. Kevin's our man. Carl did not back down at that time, but a couple of days later did.
So they all kind of left the meeting wondering, geez, Carl may come out and...
Carl did not tip his hand, and clearly Carl wanted to run for mayor, I think. Right. He'd already talked about a platform to reform City Hall. And Carl is a City Hall man. I mean, he spent some time over there, knows the issues, and has his backers, but had already started to run for Congress, wanted to switch over, I think, but ultimately stayed with Congress when Papa Doug's newspaper said, we're going for the price on Kevin tonight, that kind of thing.
Who'd run 3 front-page editorials endorsing DeMaio.
Indeed, their political views are about as close as you can get between the newspaper and Carl, but this time around they want that mayor's office, and they think Kevin's a better bet.
If he did run and did go for mayor and then lost, then, I mean, what would that do to his political career? It kind of seems like,
he'd be playing, it wouldn't have fared really well. As they say on West Wing, he'd be playing celebrity golf for the rest of his life. Although, actually, that's not technically true. If he had been eliminated in the primary, he could have switched back to the congressional, although that sort of flip-flopping, as Mr. Fletcher will tell you, can be a problem when you're trying to sell yourself as somebody of great conviction.
And plus, you're a 2-time loser at that point. So.
Yeah, and you start to smell a bit. And also, there's another candidate chasing the GOP nomination in that district who's of credit, and so it would have been tough.
Just to get a sense of those backroom meetings, were the two candidates, Faulconer and DeMaio, there?
Indeed.
Were they pitching their case?
They were that.
So do you feel like that meeting is what made DeMaio's decision?
And Faulconer had done very well, and he had contacted people ahead. He had, as they say, worked the room in advance. And so what he was sending out was a vibe that says, Carl, if you run, you're alone. All those people that were so nice to you and gave money and endorsed you and all that last time, they're not going to be there. They're with me. And I think that played into Carl's thinking. Now, Carl sent me an email the other day saying that he went to lots of meetings and no one meeting was definitive, and that he decided Congress because he's so pleased that the city now has a 5-year labor agreement that he'd always pushed for and that Bob Filner actually got. And so he was trying to talk down the idea that it was that meeting. I'm not sure I'm convinced by that.
They must have known that the support from that meeting was crucial because with an electorate that is 40% registered Democrat, they needed to get the full support.
And with the memory of 2012 when there was 2.5 Republicans I'm counting Fletcher as a half because he had been a Republican, was an independent. So they were all split up in the primary. Now, they rallied around, although rather slowly, around Carl DeMaio in the runoff, and he got beat by Faulconer. Now, this time around, since there's not going to be an 80% turnout, 80% turnout, maybe 40 or 45, Republicans have a shot because historically Republicans turn out to the polls
in the low turnout.
In these low turnout kind of snoozer elections like this is turning out to be.
So let's hear, we've got a clip from the Republican Kevin Faulconer they settled on. Let's hear what he says, because with that fiery meeting, this is a more moderate tone as he got out and launched his career. Here we go.
We will repair our broken roads, our sidewalks, our sewer lines, our infrastructure. We will bring back certainty for businesses ready to create jobs and economic growth. And we will eliminate bureaucratic waste so tax dollars are invested in public safety, parks, libraries, and improving our neighborhoods.
Kevin is not charismatic, let's put it that way. On the other hand, I give you Pete Wilson, not charismatic, 3 times elected mayor. He was, as he would tell you, a pair of brown shoes in a tuxedo world.
But
you don't need to be a fireball to get elected mayor of the city of San Diego, particularly if you have the establishment, which Kevin now does.
But different times, and Carl, of course, was a fireball. I mean, he was the flamethrower out there, and maybe they figure he's better in Congress as a backbench flamethrower here, but it's a completely different candidate than we would have seen.
And we're also talking in the primary, okay, they're all congealed, but come the runoff, it will probably, if we have a runoff, be Kevin and one of the Democrats, Aguirre, Fletcher, the New Democrat, or David Alvarez. So it will be it'll be mano a mano, hand to hand, as they say. So this, all the party behind one works well in the primary, and it may slop over to the runoff if there is one, but we don't know.
Who knows? Faulconer's time in office might have kind of woke people up a bit and want more, that bluster back in office. I mean, it'd be hard.
That.
But it will be hard to follow that up.
There might be a yearning for dullness if we have had excitement. Thank you. Now, the Democrats, to their credit, they tried this. They tried to get around just one candidate, couldn't do it. I mean, the other night they went for Alvarez. They had to go for Alvarez, who's been a Democrat longer than Fletcher, and without the controversy attached to Aguirre. They haven't been able to get their act together in the same way the Republicans did. I mean, wasn't it Will Rogers who said, I don't belong to any organized political party. I'm a Democrat.
I'm a Democrat.
And that's certainly true locally. They are not as organized as the Republicans are. And Faulconer knew that, by the way. Faulconer had a disregard or contempt, really, for the county party. Well, he had contempt for everybody and everything, but he certainly did for the county party. So I don't know the fact that they were late coming to the game for Alvarez will make that much difference.
Allison, we'll give you a last word in a few seconds. We have left
just
here
if money counts for anything, and of course it does, it seems to have paid off because Faulconer's raised about twice as much as his nearest rival, and so the Republican establishment is all the way behind
But
him.
I'm agnostic on money. I think it has certain advantages, but then those melt away, and there's free media, as they say. KPBS is on this story. The boys and girls in Mission Valley, half a dozen of them or more, are on this story. Voice is on this story. The Reader is on this story. Heck, I may even write a story or two myself. So I'm not sure that this is going to be a television or mailer dominant campaign.
But we'll certainly see. All right, we're going to move on. Many travelers in our region might not even be aware of the airport located near Interstate 5 in North County. But that could change if plans to extend its runway ever come to fruition. A step in that direction was taken this week with the release of a report saying such an extension is feasible at McClellan Palomar Airport, which everybody refers to as Palomar Airport, right, Allison? Tell us about that airport as it exists now. It's general aviation, some small commercial jets. Is that right?
It's kind of a secret airport. I think people in North County don't know about it because some of them find that they can actually fly to L.A. really quickly without having to drive all the way down to Lindbergh Field. But it was started in the 50s, and it's now at a point where the runway is just less than 5,000 feet. So it's not, ideal for these commercial jets. And it turns out that really the most important constituency that would like to see this expanded, I think, is commercial, private private jets rather, and the companies that are developing, especially in Carlsbad, there's a lot of biotech companies that are interested in this. And it's interesting because when you look at the feasibility study, there's a map of the range that could be reached if they expand the runway. And I think this is a good way of seeing visually what the impact would be. If you expanded the runway by 900 feet, you might be able to fly as far, all the way from Carlsbad to China. There's actually only one jet that could do that. I believe it's the Global Express. But that is something which I think is very appealing to some of the companies that are in Carlsbad and to some of the North County cities who are trying to attract more companies to come and base their operations there.
Is it that onerous for these corporate execs to go to
Do
Lindbergh
one
or,
stop.
my goodness, up to Orange County?
Well, I have to tell you, as someone who lives in North County, it is onerous with the traffic now to drive down to Lindbergh Field, and it's very convenient to be able to just nip to Carlsbad and catch your flight. And if you're a busy executive, that's an appeal, I think.
There's not many cities in the country that have airports that are closer, that are within 30 minutes, though. I mean, Lindbergh is pretty close, pretty central when you think about it, as far as, in Denver, it's an hour drive or whatever it might be.
Denver
I can
Airport's
imagine
in Kansas, I think. I mean, it's so far away.
Exactly.
But the trip you just described to Asia from here, I mean, that's a heck of a trip, and some onerous 45-minute or an hour in traffic drive to get down to just to get to the airport. I can imagine how this would appeal to business travelers, certainly.
Well, I think this is really part of a sort of a trend in North County, which is attempting to establish itself almost as a separate region in order to attract businesses and attract jobs. They have a university, Cal State San Marcos. They have two big hospitals, Palomar and Tri-City. This airport is sitting there sort of ripe for development. And,
so who's going to pay for this expansion? Am I
question.
going to have to pay to underwrite these CEOs and their comfort?
Well, the cost of
You can fly to Asia too, Tony.
This is the question. And Supervisor Bill Horn, who is really the one who's kind of behind a lot of the initiatives to expand this airport, the county has already spent about $75 million in the last decade to upgrade the runway. He says that in order to expand that runway 900 feet would cost about $95 more million, and the FAA, he says, would be prepared to kick in perhaps two-thirds of that.
You're going to expand it over the road and into the...
Oh, no. That wouldn't work.
Expand it the other way, towards Legoland.
Expand it back east towards Camino Real over a old landfill.
Old landfill. Isn't there a tomato field back there, too?
I
There go
think
my
there's
tomatoes.
tomatoes on the other side
I
of...
see. And a golf course.
There are buildings there as well, though, right? There's
Yes.
office buildings directly to the east of the runway.
And there are residential areas, of
Oh,
course,
boy.
not that far away. So this is really the big question, is will these interests, which I think are very interested in expanding the runway, perhaps for private purposes, and some people, including myself, who've found it very convenient to be able to fly to Los Angeles without having to come down to Lindbergh Field. Will those interests overcome the local people who don't want that
Well,
extra noise?
that's what I want to ask about. What about the neighbors and the noise? 900 feet sounds like it's going to be a lot more noisy.
Well, according to the feasibility study, and this is a little hard to grasp, expanding the runway would reduce the noise because it would move the aircraft. They'd be able to start their runoff further back. And so as they take off, they would be taking off over less residential areas and more over commercial areas.
Where are our friends in Carlsbad about this? Because as a civic entity, Carlsbad, I think, has a bit of a history of not playing well with others. They've had their disputes with Encinitas to the south and certainly Oceanside to the north. Are they just going to, and they had their concerns about the desal plant there on the coast. Are they just going to sit there and let this happen, or are we talking
Well,
litigation?
actually, the mayor of Carlsbad is one of its major proponents because he wants to develop the biotech hub that is already developing in Carlsbad, and this is a major incentive. So he and Supervisor Bill Horn are both very much behind it. And I think what's interesting, you're right, the cities in North County have not always been in agreement, but there is the beginnings of a sense that the cities in North County are seeing it's to their advantage now to work together to evolve a region that will be able to attract business and more high-paying jobs by working together. So all the mayors, I think several of the mayors, 4 or 5 of them, have supported this runway expansion.
Speaking of business, tell us about the economic outlook that this study talks about with and without this extension.
Well, according to the feasibility study, the economic benefit is $321 million to the region. It creates 2,200 jobs. 81 million income to workers. The forecast over 20 years, which is $8 billion, says that expanding the runway would increase the income by 163 million, which is actually not that much over 20 years. And I think the question is, where is that benefit going to go? Is it going to go to a few private corporations? Is it coming to the county? You know, where exactly is that benefit going? Because there's the cost to the taxpayer and the noise factor as well.
Are we going to be able to fly to China within the next decade, let's say?
Well, what is happening next is there's going to be a master plan, a 20-year master plan, where all these things will be discussed. And in that, one hopes, well, definitely, there will be some kind of public participation. But it's not that long. They're talking about ending that 20-year master plan in 2015. So people who are interested in having input, I think, need to wake up and start playing a role in this.
And there's going to be chances, of course, for the public to comment on all this.
That's right, yes. At the moment, there has been there is a committee, but the people who are touched by the noise have not really had much of a say. And I think now this process with 20-year master plan, they have to, for environmental reasons.
Who's the final decision maker? The Carlsbad City Council, Board of Supervisors, Coastal Commission, Airport Commission?
All of those people would probably have a say.
So you got to get a lot of ducks in a row here.
You've got to get a lot of ducks in a row, correct.
Yeah, so that's going to be, and I guess it remains to be seen just how tough the pushback will be.
Yes, it was interesting that not very many residents showed up, in fact, at this meeting that the supervisors had to accept the feasibility study this week. But as the process moves on, we may see more public involvement.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That wraps up another week of the stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank Tony Perry, Allison St. John, and Dorian Hargrove for joining me. And reminder, all these stories are available at our website, kpbs.org. Thanks very much for joining us today on the Roundtable.